Welcome, everybody. We'll get started in just a few seconds or maybe a minute or two. We've opened this up. We've got a great conversation for you today. We are letting folks join, and we'll get started in probably 1 minute. Thanks for your patience, and thanks for joining. Great to see some familiar names. Digging this. All right. Happy summer. What do you think? 1 past the hour. Let's get started. All right. Good evening. Good evening. And good day, no matter where you are. It is summertime, and I hope you're all enjoying it. My name is David Giesica. Welcome, and thank you for joining us. This is the CONVERGED Community Hour. If you have attended these in the past, you may have heard a lovely voice. Unfortunately, she is a little under the weather today, so we wish Hollis a quick recovery and some good rest. CONVERGED Community Hours are held monthly every third Thursday at noon Eastern to virtually connect members and discuss a variety of topics based on member interest. So be sure to submit any topics of interest either through the chat or to member services at convergeusergroup.com. If you've missed any of our past community hours, do not fear. They are available on our resources and news page. Check out convergeusergroup.com, and on the top, you'll see the tab for resources and news. Click on videos. You'll see all of our fantastic webcasts for on-demand viewing. In case you're not familiar with the CONVERGED User Group, or in case you have forgotten, we are a customer-led community connecting members who run Dell Technologies converged and hyper-converged infrastructure so that we can facilitate exploring of ideas, solutions, best practices, and experiences. If you're interested in learning more, join the CONVERGED User Group. Now, for today, please use the Q&A function or chat to submit questions or engage with us and the speakers. We do want this to be as interactive as possible. We know that folks may be shy at times. We've got some polling available to try and boost that interactivity. Fantastic topic today. So please engage and let us know what your thoughts are. We will provide a survey at the end so that we can find out how we did. If we did well, tell your friends. If there's areas we can improve or we did poorly, please tell us so that we can make those improvements. As a reminder, this is your user group, so please do let us know what we can do to help better serve you. With that, if I didn't introduce myself, I'm David Giesica. I'm with the CONVERGED User Group Board of Directors. And joining me today as co-hosts, returning from other co-host duty, I have Adam Lyon and Adam Little, both board members. So Adams, thank you very much for joining us. We also have special guest Pete Gurr. We're going to talk security and cybersecurity today. And before we get started, Adam Lyon, please introduce yourself for the folks who haven't met you before, or remind folks what you do and where you're doing it. And then Adam, please do the same.
Absolutely. Thank you, David. Yeah, my name is Adam Lyon. I'm the Director of IT for Lincoln Investment Planning. We are one of the largest independent broker dealers in the country, and the entire network infrastructure is under my and my team's purview. And, Mr. Little?
Awesome.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, David. So Adam Little, I am a cybersecurity administrator. I grew up on the infrastructure side, so deploying VxRail and hyperconverged Dell solutions here. I work for New Belgium Brewing, which is out of the craft space now after our recent acquisitions, but arguably the third or fourth largest brewery in the United States, whatever chart you're looking at. And just happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. And that change in your title is relatively new. So congratulations with that.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Pete Gurr, thank you for joining us, and thank you for being special guest. Please tell the folks.
I don't know how special I am, but thank you, David, Adam, and Adam. Great to meet you both. So hi, I'm Pete Gurr. I'm based in Massachusetts here in the States. I've been back at Dell for about 2 years, and I'm the marketing lead for one of Dell's internal business units, which we call the Infrastructure Solutions Group, or ISG, and I'm the cybersecurity marketing lead for that business unit at Dell. There's a little bit of my background, because I know when people hear marketing, they automatically will turn off, as maybe they should. So I'm not a technologist by education, but I'm certainly a technologist by practice. I've been in IT for about 25 years, got my start in the backup and recovery space, data protection and infrastructure. I worked at EMC back in the 90s and early 2000s. So over those 25 years, I think there's just a couple of things that are relevant to the discussion today, and also will give you a kind of sense for who I am. About a third of my roles have been in marketing roles, marketing and strategy. So, how are we selling what we're building to customers and why, right? Another third has been as a product manager. So, that's really one step away from engineering. That's what are we building? Who are we building it for? And then how are we going to take that to market? And so I've worked for EMC, Hitachi, NetApp, Iron Mountain, a few other companies. The other third of my career has been as an analyst. I actually sort of changed teams. I went from the vendor solution side to the analyst side back in the early 2000s with a company called Enterprise Strategy Group, or ESG. And that was an absolute eye-opening experience for me, incredibly learning experience, because the vendors that, like Dell, were now our clients, and we were in the middle between the vendors and customers like Adam, right? It's a pretty interesting space. So I've gotten into security and cyber over the last 5 years, intentionally getting out of infrastructure into cloud, and then ultimately into cyber here at Dell. So happy to be here. Thank you,
Pete. Fantastic, Pete, and thanks for joining us. We'll get into a little bit of your history there in a second, but I wanted to start it off with trends and what we're seeing. Adam, it feels like, well, let me just say, we'll jump right into it. How are security and infrastructure related in your view, and what trends are you guys seeing there, and what are you hearing from other members?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as far as infrastructure and security go, Dave, this is something that's always been tied together. At least having the same conversation. When we talk about traditional infrastructure, whether it's servers and setting proper permissions and security on those, you're talking about firewalls. Security right there by definition, access list, control, even just being aware of encryption, VPNs, SSH for management instead of Telnet, HTTPS over HTTP. These are just basic tenets of security that have always existed in the framework of infrastructure. So it's always been there. So I think historically, that's where we've always seen those tie together. As the landscape's shifting a little bit, the technology's changing, the security needs are changing too. So I kind of feel that as they've been relative partners, as landscape changes, those two relationships have come up. And I think Adam, if you maybe want to take the next stage of this and just kind of run with that, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I was going to say pretty much the same thing, right? My career has been exclusively in infrastructure up until this point, but it's just always been kind of an afterthought, right? Of how are we going to keep this secure? How are we going to come back after a security audit, right? And true things up, where I think more and more the conversation with specifically IT and infrastructure folks in general, right, is you realize this is much easier if we start from a more secure approach, right? Are we deploying this infrastructure with security in mind? Are we starting with a zero trust architecture? Are we doing things that, those conversations are much easier to be had at the beginning of implementing something versus coming back and trying to retrofit things, right? Then it turns into, like you were saying, with just firewall rules and application firewalls, microsegmentation, all the buzzwords around security and infrastructure, right? It's much easier to think about that ahead of time. And for me specifically, at least, lots of times in a 24/7 manufacturing operation or a 24/7 services operation where I've exclusively worked, the conversation has shifted, right? From what are we going to do to keep the infrastructure up 24/7? Because we do have cloud solutions to what are we doing about this latest ransomware or this latest security threat, right? So those are questions that historically infrastructure folks haven't gotten. So then it turns into this security by committee, right? Where I think it wasn't until recently that a lot of people are realizing that can't work, right? We do need to have a dedicated security resource for a lot of that.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. We've got a poll up here. So if you're in the audience here and you haven't seen it, please look for the poll, but it piggybacks right on that. Let's get a sense of what the audience here, where the security function is in their organization. Pete, since you just took a drink, why don't you, anything to follow up on that?
There's so much good stuff that Adam and Adam said. So just a couple of thoughts, if that's all right. And I'm kind of looking how have things changed over the last 30 years, because I think we'll talk about what has changed. What are we looking at today? I guess part of it is, whose job is it in your organization? And when I'm talking about security or cybersecurity, let's say security, but what I'm talking about is protecting an organization, not necessarily a business, but anybody who's data driven. So I'm going to assume that everybody who's watching or listening to this connected with an internet connected device today, right? So if you did, and I know you did because you're watching it, we're all part of the problem, right? We are all part of the endpoint. We are all part of the perimeter. In fact, I would say to Adam, there may be no perimeter. What is the perimeter today, right? It's a very squishy perimeter and it's not very well defined. Is it my laptop, my phone, or my IoT device? And also when we're talking about cyber threats, it could be, right, our doorbell, your Nest doorbell, right? Anything that's connected to the internet is at risk. It's a vulnerability. And that's one thing. The other thing is, I think the ways that we have traditionally protected or provided security to the infrastructure have changed. Data protection used to be backup, maybe to tape, maybe to Iron Mountain underground, or maybe a DR plan to protect us against a terrestrial or, person-made or man. The threat now is in the ether. It's digital. It's not necessarily physical. It doesn't have to be present. It can be anybody, anywhere, and they could steal your credentials and appear like you're an employee, right? Insider attacks is one of the fastest growing attack vectors. So a lot has changed, and I'll just wrap it up by saying, I've been saying for a couple of years, and something, we certainly say here is that security or responsibility for protecting an organization's data is really everyone's job, but there should be somebody waking up every day whose sole purpose it is to protect not only the infrastructure, but really the data, the assets, right? The workloads, the apps. Adam, I'm assuming your organization has I'm Adam Little, your organization has some recipes, right? Some proprietary brewing recipes, like the Coke formula in another way. That's your business in one way. And if that were to get out or be destroyed or changed or sold to your competitors, it would fundamentally change the way your organization worked. So I'd say it's sort of become an existential threat. Cybercrime has become an existential threat. It's just a different form.
For sure.
I want to dive into that in a second, but let's just get the polling results up here and see what we've got. Can you guys see this? Okay, so interesting. Adam Little, what do you think about this? Is this what you were expecting?
Yeah, I think that's pretty standard for where folks would land, right? I just think just because the way that landed out, right, doesn't mean that that's that sole person's responsibility. I think there's definitely this push for security is every employee's responsibility. We've been trying to really harp on that as well, and to touch a little bit on what Pete was saying, right? I think a lot of companies, when they think about a BCDR plan, right, they think about a meteor or an earthquake or something ridiculous, right? And even our conversations have been more so forget that, right? We're not concerned about that, which even in manufacturing, right? Even the argument of having a BCDR plan didn't make a ton of sense, because if we can't manufacture beer, it doesn't matter if we can fail email over to somewhere else and turn it on, right? So that kind of devalued putting money into a BCDR plan. And it wasn't until recently, I would say in the last couple of years, that the conversation has changed on that's not why you have a BCDR plan. You really need to have a cyber resiliency plan of like, if malware spread across our network or we had a data breach, how do we handle that? How do we dig into that? What are the forensics? Where did that start? How did it get out? What did we lose? Can we answer all of those questions, right? And building that plan has got way more value to me personally in manufacturing than where can we fail our service over and turn them back on. So I think that's kind of maybe more in IT in like the cloud era, right? A lot of people are quick to say, well, we can fail this to Azure, or we can stand this up in AWS or what have you, if something happened to our infrastructure on premise. So I think that's part of changing that conversation, the way we think about recovery.
And that's a really interesting point, Adam, because like you said, you're in manufacturing, Lincoln is not. Our BC or business continuity and DR plans always kind of followed, well, can we still keep these services? So that being able to send email, voice communications, that failover, the terrestrial threats were always there. But, if we were ever imposed upon, we still had to be able to fail over somewhere else to still keep that business going. But in that same breath, even though the application is a little bit different, the shift towards cyber resiliency is still there. And I think that's just more to the point about how security in general is shifting and evolving across industries, whether you're manufacturing, financial services, anything else, that becomes more of the actual threat. I think, not to say that you couldn't have a giant meteor fall out of the sky and take out 2 data centers. There's probably a little bit more you need to worry about at that point, but it's now kind of shifting, I think, for most people. Well, like you said, what happens if we get hacked? What happens if our data is breached or, our IP gets out on the loose? That is now, Pete, right to your point, like that is the threat that more people are waking up. And I think just kind of puts more weight behind the fact that security is now becoming everybody's responsibility, but you still need to have somebody formally focusing on the IT security and policy for your company, at least driving it somehow, whether you're doing it in-house or you have it outsourced or a hybrid of both.
I mean, you guys are, so we could go around the table. We could pick all of our participants, the industry that are in. They don't even need to work for a big company. They could work. So I have a gentleman who runs his own company. He runs a pest company. So he handles everything from mouse traps to spraying for, ticks in the yard. It's him and his wife. And he's got several thousand customers over a 10-town area out where we live in central Massachusetts. It's just the two of them, and they run all of their business on a couple of laptops, his phone. He's always connected. For him, he gets up and checks many different data points, maps, weather, geo. He uses Waze to get from house to house when he's, trying to be efficient. If email and his phone went out, right, if he and his wife were attacked, that's their critical application. They're out of business. So it's just a matter of scope and scale, right? Every industry, regardless of whatever industry, our listeners may be in, has applications or data sets that are absolutely critical and the most important for their business. And it's going to be different. And those are the ones that the attackers are going for, right? They may be getting in through your email, but what they're going for are your crown jewels. If this was a bank, right, Adam, if this was 100 years ago and we were bank robbers, we went through the bank, what are we doing? We're headed to the vault because that's where the goodies are. It's a similar analogy here. Where do the goodies live? And they used to live in the data center, right? They used to live in the infrastructure when the infrastructure was the data center. When those crown jewels, the data's everywhere, it becomes much, much more difficult to protect. And one thing that I see in the poll questions, I'm actually encouraged by having an executive level person or position, right? But the other ones are interesting because they're kind of spread all throughout different domains or different roles. And the network one is interesting because I think traditionally security has meant spending on prevention. Let's keep the bad folks out, right, with the network and other things. Again, not a lot spent on recovery, to Adam Little's point, right? How do we recover from a cyber attack? What are we doing? Because it's a spectrum of risks. Yeah, the meteor is an existential risk, but it's very low probability. There's probably been hundreds of cyber attacks on all of our companies since we got on this call today. It's every minute, so it's tough.
timely for poll number 2, and thanks folks for answering and engaging with us. Please, we had something in the chat. Rodney's writes in, I think if you have multiple manufacturing plants, you need to fail over so that all locations are not down. That's their case. Sure, fail over the data center and keep the other locations running. Absolutely. The other question I was thinking about while we're waiting for poll 2, you know, we learned an awful lot over the past year with the pandemic about things that we used to do in physical person, but we're now able to do remotely, certainly from our own houses or offices or what have you. Do you think that the past year has changed the cybersecurity threat because now those folks changed the way they were thinking and we're trying to do things more remote? Or is this just coincident that it feels like we've had a year of things have been accelerating over the past 18 months or so? You think there's been a lot of people who are at home and out of work and decided I might as well try and do some ransomware?
Oh, that's a different question.
Okay.
I thought you were going to say, are we more at risk now? Is where I thought you were going to say.
There's a couple.
Only at more risk because I think there's more people trying it. That's what it seems like to me.
They might be two halves of the same question, Dave. That people are maybe out of work, bored. It is easier. You have ransomware as a service now. I mean, it's that easy. You could go opt to do that real quick if you wanted. In the same breath, everybody's been remote, which has been great. There's been resiliency. Everybody's been able, for the most part, to continue to conduct business, but has now kind of really pushed that spread, to our conversation about where the data center lives, and it really doesn't. I mean, you've got stuff out at the edge. You might still have a traditional data center. You might be completely in the cloud, anywhere in between. Pete, like you said, your buddy and his wife. It's shifted so much lately. And I think that you have to look at both sides of that. We've opened ourselves up a little bit more, but the bad guys have also made it a little bit easier. So I think it's maybe a little coincidence, but I think there's a little bit of, cohesion between the two of them.
There is synchronicity. I think we're seeing a little bit of a perfect storm.
Thank
right?
you. That was the word.
Yeah, well, no, it's just an idea, right? I mean, it's confluence, whatever you want to call it. But it seems like that's what we're seeing. I mean, it's funny how a couple of years ago, vendors and everyone was talking about digital transformation, right? I don't hear that anymore. Many leaders have said, look, we've transformed. We've done 2 years of technological evolution in about 6 months with the pandemic, right? Getting everybody productive and safe and what have you. The speed of doing that comes at a cost, right? The cost is we're probably not as safe and we may not have been as due diligence, right, at protecting some of those. I'm just saying with speed comes some risk, right? But to the economic thing, so there's been a lot of news. Every day there's cyber attacks in the news, but something that kind of came up, I'm not going to say recently, but I'm just going to use a quote. Cybercrime is already it represents the greatest transfer of wealth in history. So transfer of wealth, moving assets from one group to another. So that quote was from the NSA chief, and it was in 2012, so almost a decade ago. Before Sony, before NotPetya, before Colonial, before any of the ones you want to remember, it's absolutely an order of magnitude higher now, a decade later. And it's not just these big attacks once a year or once a quarter, if you notice. It's almost every day now. And you're getting now policymakers, right? So not political, but the current administration, just as the last administration did, has an eye on this space. And I think you're seeing some increased activity there. I don't know whether it'll be effective. I think it will in some cases, but there's a lot here. So yeah, a lot to unpack.
Look at that. I was double blind muted. Yeah, absolutely a lot to unpack, and it's a giant space. We had the poll results come in. Looks pretty good. Looks like most of the folks feel pretty comfortable with it. I'd like to dig into a little bit more on this concept of cyber resiliency. Is this a new way of thinking, or is it just a new label for something that's always been out there? That's one question I have. And another question is, do we pretty much have to accept that it's not a matter of if, but when, and therefore you've got to start forcing everybody at the company to think through this scenario, and how do you do that?
I would say you take that, it's a matter of if, not when, or when, not if. I mean, it's going to happen. It's, to Pete's point, you're not hearing about this once a year now. You're hearing about this on a way more frequent basis. Hopefully it never comes across anybody on this call's, front door. But I think you have to accept the fact that it is a very, very real possibility. So prepare yourself, prepare for the worst, hope for the best. But I think if anybody was to just ignore it and say, cyber resiliency, not a big deal, or it's just kind of more, a conceptual thing, then you're probably setting yourself up for some hurt. And I think you need to be prepared. And I think you also need to make sure that everybody else in the company, even outside of IT, is aware of that. So going back to the cyber resiliency plan, kind of augmenting or the evolution of your business continuity plan, that awareness, I think, should be there enterprise-wide regardless.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think this kind of, it's an interesting position, right? Because sometimes it's a story of competing priorities, right? In IT, right? You've got so much time and so many tools that you can buy to put in place that, like Rodney's question earlier was great, right? Of like, if you're in manufacturing as an example, because obviously I am, and different verticals are different, right? So that you have to kind of look at your business and make your decisions. But running with that same example, right? When we designed infrastructure, we always designed our manufacturing plants to function on their own, right? If they were separated from the rest of the network or other sites or headquarters where we have infrastructure, can that site run in a silo, right? For more geographic BCDR disruptions, right? But that also plays hand in hand with cyber resiliency, that those sites could run and they don't depend on the other. The argument there is, you look at somebody like JBS as an example, that maybe their production sites were too connected. And that's how somebody got malware in and leveled most of their production while it was down. So it's this weird dance, right? Of like, I don't have all the answers, right? But we just need to take, back to Pete's point of like, what is your company's crown jewels, right? Like if something happens tomorrow, we need to ship beer. We need to make it and we need to get it out the door. That is our critical tipping point for our business. But for Adam Lyon's business, that's not, right? So find with your business, what is your critical tipping point, and figure out what you can do to secure those pieces to try to be in a better place. And again, I think it goes back to just trying to keep security top of mind when you're putting in a new solution, right? Is it built with best practices? Is it the way you can secure it the best? It's all a best effort, right? Of what gaps can we close and limit our liability.
Yeah,
Adam, that's some great points. I want to jump in real quick because you're talking about your manufacturing plants basically being air gapped, or possible, being able to run air gapped from everything else. I thought that's a neat segue into our third question, which is kind of about the air gap. So we can put that poll up, please, Hollis. And then Pete, I think I cut you off on your response there. So
nope, not at all. You are the director, sir. I'm going with you. So so cyber resilience. Here's the marketing guy now, right? Let me just say, cyber resilience. Think of it as an overall strategy that is like cybersecurity. It incorporates sort of traditional cybersecurity, people, process, technology. And think about the NIST framework, right? For those of you in the security domain, NIST is a great starting point because it does a bunch of things. It does end-to-end. It breaks it down into different areas of the organization or the infrastructure, whatever you'd like to call it. But one thing I think that cyber resiliency does that cybersecurity doesn't do necessarily is it focuses on I mean, resilience is about the ability to prepare for and adapt to changing conditions, to changing threats, but it's also the ability to recover. And again, I think as just a global or an IT organization, world, spending has been spent at the perimeter on prevention and not recovery. And it's all about recovery at some level. I mean, to the person in the chat, Rodney, I'm sorry, that mentioned multiple manufacturing plants you need failover so they're not down. He is absolutely right and correct on one level. If you got to have the buildings, you got to have the brewery equipment, you got to have the banking systems. But it's not about the building. It's about the data. The ability to ship beer, right, is about the building and the stuff in it. But at some level, it's also about the recipes and the software that runs it and the way that you get your materials and the right balances and stuff. And if all of that is done, if your Oracle financial system has been corrupted and that's what runs your banking operations, it doesn't matter how many DR sites you have or how many backup computers you have. You don't have what you need to run your business. So I think it's a different level of perspective. We all have day jobs. I get that. It's our job to make sure the infrastructure is secure, but always have that idea in mind as what are the bad folks trying to get to? It isn't my new shiny laptop, right? It's what's on it, or it's not, your mainframe. It's what's on it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'll jump in. We have a former guest who's also attending in the education space. And one of the key things in the education space that you have to protect is the young kids' personal information. The Converge User Group hosted a keynote speaker for the Virtual Connect conference in June, Frank Abagnale. If anybody remembers, Catch Me If You Can. And Frank said the most expensive social security number is somebody who's just been born on the dark web, because you can use that for basically 18 years before anyone's going to have any key that the information has been stolen. Whereas you might think that old people would be good, but that it's a shorter time and it's going to be more easily detected. So it's more perishable. Adam Little, have you guys, you don't have to talk to this per se, but do you know of folks who've had curious attacks that, like, imagine instead of going after all your data, what if they just held your canning supplies? What if they held those hostage and you could make as much beer as you wanted, but you couldn't can it. So at some point you're stuck. Are those attacks happening, or creative attacks like that happening? And I'll open up to Adam Lyon as well. Any stories of friends in the industry or experiences, attacks that you can share with the members, and what were the lessons learned there?
Sure. Yeah,
I was start on the West Coast.
Yeah, I was just going to dive into what you were saying. Right? There's a certain element of, I'm not going to say that, like, for example, right, the fat tire recipe isn't important to us, because it absolutely is. But I would bet that there's top 20 craft brewers that you could say, here, have this beer and recreate it, and they could get pretty damn close, right? So while that's important, right, realistically, what would be the most critical path for us, right, is usually what we try to think of. And that would absolutely be with COVID, and business has been fantastic, and thank everyone that buys New Belgium products for your patronage over this last horrible year with COVID. But absolutely, our pinch point would be getting beer out the door, right? Are there trucks in the lot waiting to be loaded with pallets of product, and we can't do it, right? Because we can't print pallet tags, or we can't, that system's down. So we've already taken steps in our business to try to make sure those systems are offsite, or a little more protected, or a little more secure than other systems. And again, that's always a moving target, right? There's always opportunities to improve there. But we had an incident probably at the beginning of COVID where our parent company got hit with ransomware, and we could see it try to traverse to our network. And this goes back to a little bit of the JBS example of, we did have site-to-site VPNs connected to them, and that was enough that we had tools in place that blocked it, and it was enough that we could say, all right, done. Like, those tunnels are done, right? It's going to disrupt people's workflow. They're not going to have the connectivity they need to our parent company for the next week or two, but thankfully we had tools to alert on that immediately, and we could take preventative action to make sure that that wasn't going to get us into a worse situation. So I just think it's one of those things that for us specifically, right, just ransomware and encrypting and wrecking that daily process for us would be pretty detrimental. So we need to do what we can to try to address that, which is always tools and a trade between, are we spending enough? Are we not spending enough? Do we have the right tools? Do we have the right people? Right. And that's where, again, I just try to, every decision we make going forward with specifically infrastructure or services, try to keep security top of mind.
Yeah. Adam Lyon, what are you guys seeing out there? What are you hearing from peers?
Well, I mean, we are fortunate enough, and, you know, knock on wood, we have not been hit. Yeah, exactly. We have not been hit, and, you know, certainly don't want to put the target on the back here, but it's, like I said before, it is at the front of everybody's mind. You know, while we don't really have, you know, some of the same concerns, Adam, like you were talking about, I mean, there's a lot of different pieces that could disrupt New Belgium's business along the way, whether it was, you know, the recipes, the brewing, the canning, shipping, etc. For us, it's about
supply chain, the whole supply chain.
And anywhere along that path could really, you know, give you a bad day. For us, data, investor data, positions. And we talk to a lot of other, you know, holding and clearing firms. A lot of customer data is getting sent back and forth. So we're always concerned and aware of, how is that being exchanged? Is that being exchanged securely? What's happening on the other side when you send that out? You know, where is that data going? So it's same conversation, different application, you know, but I mean, Adam, much like you said, it really, every decision that you make, you know, along with, is it good for the company and is this in the company's best interest? Is it secure? Am I doing what we possibly can to make sure that this is as secure as it possibly can? And, you know, I think you may have said it before, Adam, it's, you know, it's best effort. You know, I mean, it's, you do what you can within reason. You know, whether that's from whether your company's, you know, awareness is about security, how much they're willing to invest in it, which I would hope that in this day and age, more companies are willing to invest in that a lot more. You know, you have to do what you can with what you've got, but also be aware, what else could you do? You know, there's no technical solution that's going to be 100%. You know, I think we always, you know, where you put the tools in that you can do, or that you can afford, that you can implement, but, you know, it's not going to be 100%. You still have to have the, you know, people awareness as well. You know, it's a balance. It's constantly shifting, but, you know, like I said, for us, it's really about, where is that data? Is it secure? And, you know, Pete, right back to your point, you know, where are your crown jewels? Every company's going to have different crown jewels. So do what you can to protect your house. And I think that's what.
And you're in a regulated industry, right? I mean, that's another, it's both a blessing and a curse, right? So for financial services, especially, healthcare is another one, but FinServ is an interesting one, and I can kind of wrap back to this isolated poll question, David, if that's okay for a second, just to connect a few dots. Okay, so from a financial services perspective, and even if you're not in the banking industry, you should listen, because this is, it's relevant, and it's sort of something to think about, a takeaway. Exactly what Adam Lyon just described. It's about the data. So if I went to the bank after this meeting and I tried to get money out of the ATM and I couldn't get my balances. Okay, so that is critical. That's a good example. There's something called Sheltered Harbor. It's not Safe Harbor, it's Sheltered Harbor. This was it's a nonprofit initiative that was started in the US banking industry after the Sony Pictures attack of 2014. Why? Sony was one of the first attacks where the attackers went after the backups. Why? Because they knew, I'm going to go after production. Where's the user going to go? They're going to go to the backup tapes. They destroyed the backup tapes. User can't recover, and they exfiltrated the data. The banking industry looked at that and said, what if that was the bank? What if that was one of the big 6 banks or big 8 banks or whatever? Or core banking, or if their core banking systems went down, right? The service providers underneath the banks that really do all the processing. So basically what Sheltered Harbor is, if you remember, it's not a mandate, right? It's a best practice right now. Every night, transactional records and a very small set of data, very specific, is transferred into a data vault. Basically nightly vaulting of those account records, so that not that that business, not that Lincoln or any other bank could survive, but that that data could survive even in the event of a catastrophic attack on one of the banks, right? So that's what it's about. It's about the continuation of the financial systems in this country, sorry. And then you could argue globally, right? Because of the connectedness of everything, which is to Adam Little's point, right? So that's one lesson, is backups are not safe, okay? Immutable backups are not necessarily safe. So isolation is one way, to add additional layers of security, prevention, and protection for critical apps or critical infrastructure and data. So David, I don't know if you want to get to that polling question now, but I think that was one connection I wanted to make. I think sheltered harbor is a standard that other industries are going to look at. So you might want to, just learn a little bit about that. Sure.
Yeah, Hollis, do we have the results from that final polling question? Great, thanks. Okay, 50 split with a little bit less, a little bit fewer folks on the yes. Looks like no and kind of win out, but interesting.
It's 50-50, isn't it? No?
Yeah, it is, but I kind of lump into no.
Oh, you put them in. Yeah, what is he talking about?
Yeah, that's, it's summertime. I was trying to make everybody try and keep it fun. Not that this isn't fun. I think it's I don't want to call it all doom and gloom, because it's not necessarily. This is just the reality of the space, right? There are things that you can and should do to be smarter about it and more resilient in the space. When you get in your car, you know that putting on your seatbelt is going to make it a lot more survivable should something happen. There's probably that layer of just best practice for security hygiene across IT and across how you do things as an individual. And I think we're moving from this realm of the past 20 years, when we look at Gmail and we look at Facebook and we look at all of these consumer apps that were free and delivered value to people for free. Well, what I think a lot of folks failed to realize is it wasn't free. You're paying for it with your data, your individual data. And now we've got 10 or 20 years, a decade or two of time where we're realizing, hey, maybe that wasn't a good idea. But unfortunately, we've also trained a lot of people to not care about the data so much.
Yeah.
I think, that is an individual challenge or a philosophical challenge that we as IT members are going to have to overcome with the people who are outside of IT in the company. But I think as we move through this and you see the things like the meatpacking impact, well, now this concept of cyber is actually being real and real at scale in a way that people feel it. If you go to the store and you can't get your meat that you want to buy because you want to grill out this weekend, or you want to buy your ribs, but you don't really want to pay $6 a pound for ribs when you're used to paying under $2 a pound for ribs. When you try to go fill up your car, I guess this would be 3, you try to go fill up your gas tank, but you either can't because your local gas station doesn't have the fuel that you require, or the price is like suddenly $1 or $2 more per gallon. There are things that are making this very, that are taking the ether and bringing it into the physical.
It's personal, is what it is, David. It's become personal and individual. It isn't just out there somewhere, because we're always connected, and we always want to be. We've been conditioned to it. And you're right. There's a great cost for it. I'm not just being an old gray hair guy, right? I got a lot of kids and they're all connected. I'm part of the problem, part of the life. And so a lot of times these things require a change of perspective, to just step back for a second and realize that, Adam Little, your daily job, and Adam Lyon, everybody's daily job is not to run IT. The companies we work for are not in the business of running computers. they're in the business of something else, and that business requires data, and that data needs protection. Just start with that in mind, just to think for a few minutes of how my role contributes to that. That can help, I think. But yeah, it's going to get very interesting. I think David, that's why people who are not in a security domain or job now are paying attention to cyber attacks, because it's affecting them personally. You couldn't get gas, anything like that.
Yeah. It's a big topic. This is not the last time we'll talk about it here, folks. In the wrap-up survey, please, if you want to hear more about this or different angles of security, submit that. The conversations we've had leading up to this, we could talk for a long time. I think it might be a fun time to bring back every quarter. Maybe we readdress this question and see what's changed or what the updates are. There's a lot of opportunity for continued conversation. It'll be neat, but it's also, it's not all doom and gloom. And I think that's more what I'd like to leave it on as there's a lot of great stuff out there, and we can overcome this, but you got to be smart about
it.
Those are kind of my closing thoughts. Adam Little, we'll work West Coast, East Coast. Your closing thoughts, please.
Sure. I was just going to touch on, I think that's, it's super powerful, right? Because if you just look at, let's just call the blanket security vendors and different solutions, right? There's a myriad of tools that are out there, but that's where it is powerful to connect with other people. Hey, what are you using? Have you seen this? Immutable backups, email awareness, right? Malware attachments and stripping. We just had an email yesterday that came in that had ransomware attached to it and a phishing link. A tool that we were leveraging, which I won't throw the name out here, but stripped that attachment, rewrote the URL, the user clicked on it, and then pulled the email out of their inbox, right? Like, that's pretty powerful. And that's probably I think one of our advantages specifically at New Belgium is we have low turnover. So I take pride in the fact that, I feel like our employees are pretty well trained. And in that moment, he was very embarrassed that he did that. Like, he just went through our annual security training and knew to identify phishing links and all of that. But it's tough, right? It's a constantly evolving game of chess of different pieces. But again, back to being positive, the great thing is it's driving innovation, it's driving collaboration. People are coming up with better tools, better solutions all the time. But that's the power of connecting and sharing with people. Like, hey, what are you doing, right? Are you isolating SCADA networks so that we don't lose power utilities and stuff like that we just never thought of? So, that was a conversation that never would have happened 10 years ago, where now it is. Mm-hmm. So it's empowering to us, right? Collaborate with your peers and let's do what we can, right? It's the best effort. No one's ever going to be perfect on it, but take steps towards being better on that.
Yeah, 100%, Adam. And, kind of to Dave, what you were saying earlier about maybe this is something that we touch on periodically throughout the year, for the community hours here. Because Adam, you just hit it on the head. In a general sense, talk to your peers, talk to other people, even if they are not in your industry, even if they are, there's some benefit. I'm sure other manufacturing, other folks in here who work in manufacturing might pick up on certain things that are specific to that, but there's also some pretty, high level, we'll call them generic concepts that is applied to security in business. Pete, like said, protect your data, and understand the importance of what we do as technologists to drive the company and keep it safe. It's a realistic, like I said, I wouldn't call it doom and gloom. It's definitely a scary thing, but it's just the world that we live in these days. So understanding what other people are doing, what options are out there, both from a technical as well as a personal standpoint. And Adam, kind of that last point there, you can have the training, long tenured employees, and somebody just, a little brain fart accidentally clicks and then bang, it's game over. It's just understanding that can happen, and understanding not only what people are doing, but the recovery. What is your plan? What does that look like? And just the connection that you have with other people, same industry, across industries, it's just going to make us collectively a lot stronger. And, I think that's really the name of the game right now. Education.
So that's great.
Can I leave them on a positive too? I don't want to leave a doom and gloom kind of.
Give us a positive, Pete.
Yeah. So there's a lot of practical things that we could talk about doing, but just take a step back for a second, one more time, and I want to leave you with a point of view, to something to aspire to. I think all of us to aspire to. So remember that, again, cybersecurity tends to be preventative, right? Protective. Wouldn't it be interesting if we could actually flip that on its head and think about what you're all doing to make your organizations more resilient against attacks? Think about that as a competitive advantage. So a couple of years ago, after the NotPetya attack, and you know the shipping company Maersk was one of the largest companies and the worst hit in the attack. I'm not going to go into detail. There's plenty of articles about this if you Google it. Just after the attack, the chairman of Maersk was at some financial summit, and he said this was a wake-up call. Maersk was almost done. There's a very great story in Wired magazine about how they were able to recover. But he said this attack was a wake-up call for us, and we now view cybersecurity, whatever you'd like to call it, as a competitive advantage for this company. Why? Because they know that data and their networks drive their business at some level. So I just say, wouldn't it be interesting, if you consider Belgium or New Belgium, or your company, Adam, Lincoln Financial, and for anybody, if cybersecurity and cyber resilience, our data became a competitive advantage for us. You already look at it that way, right? We all use data to do more, faster, and better. But if that goes away, so too do all the benefits that go with it. So just something to think about. And thanks for having me. Hope you let me back.
Great perspective, Pete. Well, yeah, I think you've earned a repeat here, but I'll wait for the survey.
Wait for the survey.
Actual data.
Yeah. Always.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
One thing I'll call out, if you didn't see it in the chat, Rodney has another great point in here as far as individual information. The term called plant your flag. Use yours or your kids' information and go ahead and register for financial accounts, unemployment, Social Security, et cetera, to keep the information maintained. And then that way it's all set up. So if someone tries to steal it, you're more likely to get an alert sooner rather than later. Great points there. And as always, Hollis has put the survey link in the chat. So we appreciate folks taking a couple minutes and letting us know how we do and what you'd like to see in the future. I will also let you know that we've got fantastic events always coming. You can check out convergeusergroup.com/events for the calendar of what we've got coming next. In August, we won't be at the HIMSS conference this year live in person, but we will be doing a HIMSS or a healthcare related meeting the week following HIMSS. So look at that, look out for that, and more information to come. That'll be around August 19th. And then you can mark your calendars for the first week of October. We've got a fantastic VMworld series coming up in the VR Lounge. We're going to get that squared away and open again. So mark your calendars for that and keep your eyes out. Enjoy the rest of July for the summer. And let's see here. Hollis, get well soon. Thank you very much. Gentlemen, thank you for your time. Folks on the line, thank you for attending. Great to see you here again, and everybody have a fantastic summer. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Thanks everyone.
Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
Take care, y'all.
Bye-bye.